Hello friends. Your friend Ross greets you. Today I will tell you the story of the twin sisters. Once upon a time, there were two twin sisters, Juliet and Julie. Juliet was incredibly beautiful, while Julie was quite different. She wasn't pretty like her sister, and went unnoticed everywhere. The two sisters had never been close. When they were little, all the girls wanted to be Juliet's friends, while the boys gave her chocolates and sweets, and Julie was ignored most of the time, and other times they made fun of her by calling her ugly, and no one wanted to play with her. This difference in appearance created deep resentment between the two girls. Julie increasingly isolated herself, and was filled with resentment and hatred towards her sister Juliet. As they grew older, Julie's jealousy grew more and more. Julie had already resigned herself to liking someone. Deep down she felt very lonely, and her heart was filled with hatred towards everyone, but especially towards her sister Juliet. Even though they went to the same school, Juliet ignored her, and she had never defended Julie from mistreatment. Julie felt frustrated, and decided to join the art class to release her stress. There she met John, a very cute boy. He was nice to everyone in the classroom, including Julie. A boy had never talked to him before Julie, let alone have a conversation with her. So Julie began to feel excited, and little by little she fell in love with John. In her sketchbook she only made portraits of him, and every day she thought of him, how happy she would be if he noticed her in a loving way. Julie one day decided to dress up a little more than usual. She combed her hair differently and put on makeup. She felt a little happy with her new look, but apparently it did not give the results she expected, because the girls made fun of her, and the boys looked at her with a disgusted face. This seriously affected her, and she ran crying to the bathroom to wash her face. One day his sister Juliet passed in front of her classroom, and at that very moment John was leaving class, and for being distracted he collided with Juliet, and knocked her down to the ground. John got up quickly, and helped her get up. He apologized quickly with her, and he couldn't help but see how beautiful she was, but before asking her name, Juliet left quickly. John drew a large portrait of Juliet in his art class, and Julie saw it and was completely filled with jealousy and anger inside. She ran to the bathroom to cry, and she thought that of all the boys who fall in love with Juliet, because John also had to have fallen in love with her. Every time the class finished, John would quickly go out into the hall, hoping to see Juliet again, and like that, almost a week passed, until he saw her walking straight towards him. He stopped her, told her about the time they collided, and then they started laughing. John took the opportunity to introduce himself, and ask Juliet her name. And so from time to time, John and Juliet would meet in the corridor, and they would stay for a long time talking. Julie watched them from a certain distance, witnessed with her own eyes everything that was happening, and jealousy and anger took over her. She couldn't stand her sister Juliet anymore. She had always been overshadowed by her. She always monopolized all the attention, and the look of everyone around him. Julie did not like to ask for favors, because she felt resentment for people, because of how badly they treated her, that she did not want to owe favors to anyone. But when she got home she confronted Juliet, and asked her for a great favor, that she swore to promise her that she would keep it, and it was that she would get away from John. Juliet nodded, thus confirming that she would keep her word, and that she would get away from John, showing a gentle smile, with her good girl face, which is cotton candy. But nevertheless, the opposite happened. John asked Juliet to start dating him. She accepted, and that's how they started their relationship, and they went for a walk in the afternoons. Julie was still unaware of what was happening. One day Julie came home, after school as usual, but when she entered she saw John in the living room. She did not understand why he was there, in that Juliet came from the kitchen with a glass of water for John. He was also surprised to see Julie, but he greeted her, and told her what a great coincidence to find us, and that his girlfriend Juliet is his sister. Then Julie felt as if she was being bathed with cold water, and she ran up to her room to cry, and she didn't understand why Juliet accepted John, having many suitors to go out with, why she just had to go out with him, and just when she asked him to avoid him. There Julie, between so much crying, anger and hatred for her sister, began to conspire and plan her plan, to get rid of Juliet once and for all, because she had already crossed the line, and she couldn't take it anymore. Desperate for revenge, Julie waited several long weeks for her parents to spend the weekend away from home, and Julie talked to some street guys, who have a reputation for being a bit of a troublemaker. They had already been to jail for petty theft. The night of her plan, Julie waited for Juliet to fall asleep, and quietly went downstairs, and opened the door and signaled outside, where the bad guys were already waiting. They entered the house, and sneaked inside in Juliet's room. They covered her mouth to prevent her from screaming, and from waking up the neighbors. They tore all of Juliet's clothes, and there in the middle of the darkness they made her their own, one by one several times throughout the night, and thus they took her virginity. Juliet tried to scream, but they had tied a rag over her mouth, and she could not see in the dark who her executioners were. She could only cry and kick. She did not understand why this was happening to her. Before dawn the boys from the neighborhood left the house, and Juliet couldn't get up. The pain was killing her, not only physically, but emotionally. She wanted to marry a virgin and give herself to her beloved future husband. Now she felt like a dirty rag. I was devastated in a sea of tears. Juliet did not want to tell anyone what had happened. She was increasingly opaque. She stopped smiling. She could not forget that moment. She remembered it in her mind over and over again. She began to move away from John, until she finished with him. The depression, it was killing her. She hardly ate anything anymore, until she couldn't take the despair and depression anymore, and she took her own life in her room, in the same one where she experienced torture. Julie thought that John would finally notice her now, but he was devastated by Juliet's death. He was heartbroken and ignored Julie. Despite all his attempts to win over John, all had been in vain. John felt more and more guilty. He thought that perhaps if he had helped Juliet more that would not have happened, but he did not know what she was going through. He did not understand what had happened. From being full of life she became a shadow of herself. Julie was filled with anger, that even though her sister Juliet was dead, she was still ruining her life. I take advantage of the fact that her parents were on a business trip to try to conquer John by taking him to his house. So she put on her sister's clothes, to go out to the park near where John lived. She had a very pretty dress with a big hat. John, who was passing by, saw her, and thought that his eyes were deceiving him, and that there was Juliet. He ran towards her, but he ran into Julie. Julie told John to sit with her for a while. She told him that she felt very sad and lonely since her sister passed away, and how much she missed her. But Julie didn't feel the slightest remorse for her sister, was just part of her plan for receive consolation from John, so she gave almost the night. Julie asked John if he accompanied her home. He accepted. Upon arriving home, Julie asked John if he would accompany her to her room, to show her something important. He hesitated for a while, but in the end he agreed. They went up to her room. She showed him her sketchbook, and she confessed to him that she was in love with him. From the first time he was nice to her. Instead of being flattered and thankful for her feelings, the news took him by surprise. John felt chills seeing so many of his portraits, and he thought it was creepy how obsessed Julie was with him. For a moment he felt repulsion, and he couldn't help but make a disgusted face, the same face that everyone always showed Julie. She felt that his blood boiled. He thought that he was different from the others. She got so angry, and told him that he was a fraud. He did not understand what he meant with his words. He replied surprised, "What are you talking about?" Julie then confessed that she was guilty of her sister taking her own life, that she did it to be with him, because her sister had stolen it. John was shocked and he didn't know what had happened to Juliet. He was very surprised and did not understand what Julie was saying. He approached her and held her shoulders. He began to shake her desperately. He demanded answers from Julie for everything she had said, while each time he began to squeeze her more. Julie pushed him hard from the front and he fell to the floor, and she replied, "Since you want to know so much, I'm going to show you." She took out her cell phone and put a video on it. John couldn't believe what he was seeing. He began to cry when he saw his beloved Juliet writhing desperately, seeing her break down in tears and not having been able to help or comfort her. In that, Julie grabbed some metal scissors, which she had on a table near her, and stuck them into John's chest. John could not react quickly or defend himself. The news of Juliet had left him shocked, so Julie took the scissors out of John's chest, and stuck them back in the same spot. He started to bleed out, and he passed out right there on the floor. Julie quickly went down to the kitchen to look for plastic bags, and managed to lay John down on the bags. He was still unconscious. She didn't want it to end like this, but it was too late to turn back. Julie touched John's pulse, and felt that he was still alive. Julie began to kiss him desperately before he perished. It was their first kiss and it bothered her a bit that it was that way, but something inside her began to feel hot, so she unbuttoned John's pants and began to play with her toy. After a while she pulled down her underwear and got on top of John. She started to move on top of him, and after a while he woke up and saw such a scene, but he couldn't move because he had lost a lot of blood. When Julie was well served after abusing John all night, she gave him the last goodbye kiss, and to ensure that John completely closed her lips, she plunged the scissors into his chest repeatedly until ending his life, of the only love she had ever known. Julie took out a large and old suitcase from her closet, covered it on the inside with plastic, and there with a lot of effort she managed to put John inside it. She packed another smaller suitcase with some belongings, and as soon as it was dawn she left the house, went up to a train with the furthest destination he found. Julie arrived in a small town, looked for the first store she found, went in to buy a shovel, went as far away as possible, and there she began to dig a hole to bury the suitcase with John. But she did not realize that some boys were following her. As she was far from town, the boys began to harass her, and began to abuse her. When they realized that she was no longer a virgin, they insulted her and tore all her clothes. They abused her several times until they were satisfied. Julie did not seem to be disturbed. The time her sister was abused was just going through her mind, and she was there in the dark watching everything and recording that scene. When the boys finished doing everything they wanted with her, they checked the big suitcase and looking for things of value, and they saw John's body. They got too scared that they ran away as fast as they could. As if nothing had happened, Julie continued digging, and when she finished digging, she buried the suitcase with John underground, covered the hole well, changed her clothes, with the one she had in her suitcase with her belongings, went back to the station, and boarded a train bound for home. After 9 months, Julie gave birth to twin brothers. One baby was very cute. He was the same portrait of John, and the other baby was a little smaller and different from his brother. Julie confessed to her parents what she had passed. Julie told her parents. Juliet took her own life because John raped her, and he threatened to hurt her if she said anything, and some time later John also raped her. She told him that she would go to the police to report it, but before she said anything, he ran away, and now she is very afraid that he will come back for her, to hurt her and want to steal her babies. So her parents decided to move away, to a new city, and in order not to affect Julie's life, because she was too young to have babies, They registered the two babies as their own children, and now they were Julie's little brothers. Julie was able to start a new life, without being in the shadow of her twin sister, and without the criticism of being a single mother. This time she would no longer be shy or quiet. She became happier and happier. She learned to dress herself up to look prettier, and she would take her secrets to the grave with her. This has been all for today. I hope you liked it. I send good wishes to all. Just as bad vibrations are transmitted, good energies are also shared. That's why I hope everyone is well, and I also await your comments so that I can improve the content of the channel and so be to your liking. Her friend Ross says goodbye. Until next time, friends.